Welcome to the Becoming Aware podcast, where I, Genevieve Faulkner, share what I'm becoming aware of. Welcome to the Becoming Aware podcast. My name is Genevieve Faulkner, your host, and if you're watching this on YouTube, hi. So this episode is called Landing After Delusion. Something I have been exploring quite a lot, hyperfixating on at times, is astrology and looking at my own chart, looking at the transits and looking at how I can use the energy of the planets to create more for myself. I see astrology as part of the programming that we take on when we choose to be born on this planet. And it connects to kind of like some of the things we want to create or we want to learn about or move through or all of those things. And I also see it as like this energetic weather system for the planet. So there can be things that are easier to create if you're working with that energy rather than against that energy, which is why I'm interested in it. So I'm going to talk more about that at another point. Today, I want to talk about Pisces in Neptune, which is where it's been since 2011. It was there until last week. It just shifted into Aries. Why is this important? So this is an era, right? This is an era that we've just gone through, which Pisces is actually at home in Neptune. So Neptune is the planet that actually rules Pisces. And Pisces and Neptune are all about kind of like spirituality, dreams, illusion. It's very kind of ungrounded. So during that age or that era, there's been this element of this awakening of spirituality, but from this ungrounded place, there's been a lot of spiritual bypassing as part of this transit. And because of the spiritual bypassing, when there's been kind of groups, empowerment systems, whatever, when there's that refusal to look at what needs to be looked at in order to create the dynamic change, what happens is the shadow gets played out within the system. And so there's been elements of this at play throughout many different systems and groups all over the planet. And there's been a lot of the savior rescue type complexes and that codependent narcissistic type dynamic, lots of cults, all of that kind of stuff throughout this system, throughout this age occurring. Now, Saturn 3 years ago moved into Pisces too, and Saturn rules boundaries, whereas Neptune is all about like melting boundaries. So what I've kind of learned or become aware of and what I've experienced is that when Saturn moved into Pisces, it's like it was the beginning of the end of the delusion. And with that, a lot of the crumbling of these systems and crumbling of these dynamics began. People began to wake up. And, you know, there were people that went through a lot of uncomfortable change. I know for me, I had my own awakening during this time, leaving access consciousness, right when that transit started with Saturn, and going through the journey of kind of like becoming aware of all of the stuff I didn't realize that I was shutting off for myself. And that was quite a painful awakening, but it was one that was required. And there's so much awareness that I've got from having that experience, and I can really see how that relates to everything that is happening in the world right now. So it is what it is. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because each of us have like this house system within astrology, and dependent on which house Neptune has just transited through, that will be the area that perhaps you were a little delusional, a little ungrounded, weren't totally being truthful with yourself, and perhaps dismissing or denying some elements of your awareness. And because this has just shifted last week into Aries, all of a sudden I've noticed there's a different energy up. And talking to clients also, it's almost like there's this landing of all of a sudden being like, this is where I'm at. Like, what? This isn't quite where I thought I was going to be, right? So it's like seeing the harsh light of day and being like, wait, you're coming out of the delusion. It's like being on a trip for a really long time, and all of a sudden like waking up out of it and being like, what just happened, right? So I just wanted to do this episode about kind of how to deal with that, right? How to deal with the landing when you suddenly become aware that perhaps you've been a little delusional or ungrounded in a particular area of your life. This is going to look different to each of you dependent on where this planet has been transiting through. So some of you might have done this with money, where perhaps you had this delusional reality with money, and all of a sudden you're looking at your bank accounts and you're like, wait, I did all this work. I did all this manifesting. Where's the money? Why isn't the money in my bank account? For some of you, it might be related to a relationship that you've had, doing idealism, putting the person on a pedestal, seeing all sorts of great things that are possible, creating with this person, and yet you're looking at the relationship now and it's like you're seeing a different person because you're seeing more of who they are beyond the fantasy. For others of you, it may be that you've had an experience like me in this transit where you're part of a group and all of a sudden you're like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was about, This truth isn't quite as aligned with my own truth as I thought it was. So there's this kind of like shattering that comes first, and this kind of reclaiming yourself, and course correcting after that. So how do you deal with waking up and landing after delusion? Okay, so for what's happening in your personal life, dependent on the transit, you want to look at like, what is the projection that you've had? Like, what's the fantasy that you've had? What's the delusion? And you want to look at like, where, for those of you that this relates to other people, so relationships or perhaps a group, like what have you projected onto the group or what have you projected onto relationships that's really you? So what we tend to do sometimes is create this fantasy or this ideal that is actually based upon some of the, the best qualities that we have that we're projecting onto others, and we're not acknowledging it within ourselves. So it's reclaiming that back. It's looking at, okay, all the stuff that I thought was great, was that actually them or was that actually part of me? And if it's part of you, it's really, really acknowledging that. That is important. So which part of you did you assign to them? What part of them did you not want to see? So what part of the group, what part of the person did you not want to see? What part of the job did you not want to see? What were you not wanting to see with your financial reality? If that's where this, like what were you in avoidance of? Because in order to create a delusion, you have to cut off from some of your awareness about what doesn't fit the picture of whatever the fantasy is, right? So you often will shut out the shadow side, or you'll shut out the parts that you're in an avoidance of because there's some sort of need that you don't know how to fulfill, right? So that's the next question you want to ask. What were the needs that I had that pulled me into this delusion, into this fantasy? What was the promise that I thought that I was going to get through this journey that hasn't eventuated because it was a delusion? So those needs are going to look different, again, dependent on the area of your life that this occurred in. It might be like there were financial needs. Perhaps there was like this avoidance of the discomfort of money stress, for example. And it's that you've got to sit with. And there's this element of having to go on the journey of reclaiming you being the source of money, right? You being one with that energy, you being able to actually be something that can bring that energy into your life, or that element into your life. For others of you, it might be perhaps you thought that you were going to have this sense of belonging, like within a group. But that's really often about a place where you don't feel like you do belong. So it's about really kind of coming back home to you and looking at really owning yourself and belonging to yourself and accepting who you really are, okay? Because when we need to belong, often we'll cut off parts of ourselves in order to fit the group, right? And so it's going beyond that and actually being willing to be alone with ourselves, that actually sets us free of those needs. Any need that we have like that is often coming from a place where we've self-abandoned or cut off from the parts of us that are that energy naturally. So the needs are a lie. So acknowledging the needs and then looking at, okay, for this need to be there, I've cut off from a part of me. So now what is the part of me that I have to reclaim? And it's kind of commanding that, like you can command that you're reclaiming any part of you that you've cut off. But it also might be something that you've got to kind of develop and build over time. So for example, money, it might be that you're reclaiming the energy of like being the source of money, but it may also be like, okay, how can I like create, what are the, like, how can I build this muscle? How can I develop the capacity? Like what choices do I need to make? And it might be reading different books. It might be investing in some way. It might be, it's going to look different for each of you. But it's looking at, okay, what is the part of me that I've been in avoidance of? What are the needs that I needed to address? What part of me needed healing that I wasn't willing to be with? Because all of this connects to the spiritual bypassing. And so for there to be any delusions, a lot of the time that's there too. So what's the part of you that really requires you to be present with it now? Part of this, for some of you, there may be a process in moving through the energies of what comes up when the fog lifts, right? So some of you may have to go through a grieving process of grieving the fantasy or the delusion that you had, because that's what you perhaps thought your future was. And so there's an element of having to be really kind with yourself in this. Don't go into avoidance of that. Don't resist it. Don't feel like don't judge yourself for the journey that you've had, because you've chosen this journey for a reason. We all chose to be on this planet. We all chose the programming that caused us to move through this timeline. So there's something like that, it's all been chosen for a reason. And there's all sorts of growth and awareness that you're going to have on the other side of this. And not all of that's going to be integrated right now if you're in that process of grieving. So don't judge yourself. Let yourself have that grieving. Be kind to yourself through that. Don't feel like you've got to force yourself to move through that quickly. Just, the more present you can be with yourself and the less judgment you have, the faster you do actually move through things. It's when you're judging yourself and often perpetrating relationship dynamics that perhaps you learned from childhood on yourself that, you end up slowing down that process. So don't do that. But part of what is next with regards to moving beyond this transit, like with Neptune stepping into Aries. Aries is a completely different energy. It's about really having that creative beginning. It's about taking action, right? So we've gone from the fantasy and perhaps the delusion of manifestation, for example, of being the energy, yet not having the disconnect from the action, right? So you're not going to win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket, for example, right? If you're just sitting in your house thinking about how you're going to have the money when you win the lottery one day, but you're not buying the ticket, it's not going to happen. So it's that kind of shift that's occurring where now it's with the landing, it's looking at pragmatically, okay, every single choice that I have made up until this point has got me here. So what is the choices that I actually have to make in order to get to where I want to get to? What I feel like the next era is about is real radical accountability. So if there's no way to avoid committing to your life, if there's no transferring that responsibility onto somebody else, if you have to be the one in charge, what are you going to have to commit to choosing or creating in order to have things work out for you? So it's stepping into the energy of the one that is actually leading the show and not the one that's being misled from the space of not fully being willing to be the one that takes action, right? So it's getting really grounded and looking at, okay, now what do I choose? Now what do I have to change? And it's calling your power back in, because for those of you that have done this through relationships, or you've done this through some sort of group, or even in like with money. Like there's elements of where sometimes we give our power over to the other. And so there might be this element of needing to claim your power back, calling your power back in order to move forward. So no one has power over you. No one knows greater than you. Not when you're functioning from the space of your being. Like your inner compass can guide you to the future that you want to get to, but you've got to listen to you. And in order to listen to you, you've got to not be judging yourself and judging yourself for the choices that you've made that's got you to this point. So it's stepping beyond all of that and allowing yourself to be accountable and setting yourself free, and allowing yourself to integrate the learnings of what you've been through. Because I know for me, like I had Saturn and Neptune transiting my 8th house, which is, if you know anything about astrology, like it's supposed to be like one of the most difficult ones. Love a challenge. So it's definitely been a challenge, but I know that what I've experienced like has given me so much growth, and it's taught me so much, and I will never let something like that happen again. Like I will never give my power. I will never give I'll never get pulled into a system in the same way where I give my power away or make them greater than me. So there's a gift. There's always a gift. So ask yourself, what is the gift? What's the awareness? What's the learning that I've had from this experience? Now, what this is contributing to changing globally. So there's been that happening on a micro level. On a bigger level, we've got all of the delusions dissolving with regards to all of the, people in power and the way in which they've behaved and the way in which they treat other people. And that's kind of evident in what's coming to light with regards to the Epstein files right now. And that's a lot. Like it's a lot to sit with and be with. And I haven't read all the files. I've only seen stuff on social media at the moment, because I know I need to be in the right headspace to actually digest that, like all of that. I know it's, from what I've heard, it's like way darker than it's just. But I do think it's important to acknowledge it. And, just that, like witnessing things, putting your attention on something has the ability to change it. So being willing to, I think that with regards to the things that are happening globally, it's important when you're looking at all of that to be very present and aware with regards to the bigger picture. So asking to not have any blind spots, being aware of perhaps the ways in which things are calculated, they're being released in a calculated way. The way that social media works now, like with the shorts and whatnot, there's an element of that being similar to the way in which brainwashing happen. It's a brainwashing technique, So there may be this element of it being released in a way that is designed to desensitize us. And rather than allowing that to just happen blindly, be present, demand that you be present. If you're paying attention to that stuff, don't disconnect or disregard or go into avoidance. Pay attention and ask or command that this changes, that the people that have misused their power be held accountable. Because as a collective, like we all play a part in collectively creating like the collective reality. And it's easy to look at the things and then feel powerless in that, feel like it's too big, like you don't have any ability to change things. And perhaps go into the powerlessness that the victims felt. But we all have power. And if you don't go into that, if you don't get pulled into that, you can use that power to channel towards a greater future. And so it's being that demand, being that energy of witnessing it from the place of power and not getting sucked into the powerlessness that may contribute to creating some change. But also, I do think that there is an element of this that is also, I think with this radical accountability thing, it's important that each and every one of us sit with, what are these things triggering within us? So rather than becoming desensitized and numb and vacant, which is part of what some people in positions of power may want us to be, like they may want us to be a little more lemming-like so that we are controllable and easy to take over. And I know I sound a little, I don't know. Anyway, rather than being like that, actually being in question about, okay, what does this bring up in me? What is this triggering in me? And doing the work to shift whatever is within. Because what tends to happen with our collective reality is that things get created in cycles. And part of what creates those cycles playing out or those patterns repeating is where people hold on to the suppressed emotional energy and the belief systems from what it is the events created. And then that begins to create the same thing at a later date or something similar at a later date. Now, sometimes that is something that occurs because they just don't know how to move through that energy. For other times, it's because they think holding on to it is actually going to stop it from ever happening again. But the opposite is true. Holding on to things actually creates the repeat of the pattern. Okay, so if you're looking at things in the world and you are like this can't be happening again, some of you may see a connection between what's happening in America right now with, Germany at another time. If you're like, how is this happening again? Go inwards. If it's triggering you, if it's bringing up stuff, go inwards and look at what am I holding on to about the other event? What am I holding on to? Is there any energy I need to release? Is there any trauma or pain? We carry the trauma of our ancestors, some of the trauma of our ancestors within ourselves. So it's doing work to shift that, begins to create a space for a different possibility. So if you're looking for ways to do that, theta healing is one way to change or shift and release ancestral patterns and release like whatever is triggering, but there are many other ways. So, do whatever works for you. Is there anything else that I need to say? I think that's pretty much it for now. I hope this has been helpful for you guys. I hope this has brought some sort of awareness to you. And if it has been helpful, do let me know in the comments. But also if there's something that you want me to do a video about, feel free to let me know in the comments also. And if you have got this far, if you've been listening to this, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'm very grateful that you took the time. So have a good day, guys.